Alice is sitting in her armchair, talking to her kitten, Kitty. It's a quiet, domestic scene, the kind of afternoon where the sunlight slants through the window and the world feels steady and predictable. She's telling Kitty about all the mischief she's seen, but her mind begins to wander. She starts to imagine what it would be like if there were a looking-glass house, a place where everything is a mirror image of our own. In that world, you'd walk toward a door to go away from it, and you'd find that everything you see is just a reflection of what's actually there. This isn't just a passing thought, though. Alice finds herself standing before a large mirror in her home. She reaches out to touch the glass, expecting it to be cold and hard, but instead, her hand passes through it like it's made of soft gauze. She steps through the frame and finds herself in a world that is fundamentally inverted. It's a place where the logic of our world is turned on its head. Clocks have faces that are just pictures of faces, and the paintings on the walls are alive, moving around within their frames. As Alice explores this strange landscape, she realizes that the very structure of this world is governed by something much more rigid than the whims of a dream. She discovers that the entire landscape is actually a giant, cosmic game of chess. The hills, the brooks, and the paths are laid out like the squares on a chessboard. This realization changes everything. Alice isn't just a wanderer in a dream anymore, she is a piece in a game. She meets the Red Queen, a figure who is much taller and more authoritative than the characters she met in Wonderland. The Red Queen is the instructor of this world, and she is quite demanding. To move Alice through the landscape, the Queen explains that Alice must navigate the squares of the chessboard, but there's a catch: progress isn't as simple as walking. To move forward, Alice has to run incredibly fast. In fact, the Red Queen tells her that she must run twice as fast just to stay in the same place. This is the Red Queen's race, a frantic, circular effort where motion doesn't necessarily lead to advancement. Alice realizes that her goal is to reach the 8th square, the final rank of the board, where she will be promoted from a pawn to a queen. And so her journey begins. As a pawn, Alice's path is a series of increasingly surreal and often unsettling encounters. She boards a train where the passengers don't just talk, they think in chorus, their thoughts rising and falling in a single synchronized wave. She meets a gnat who is quite preoccupied with his own importance. She wanders through a nameless wood, a place so strange that she briefly loses her sense of who she is. It's a terrifying moment of identity loss, where the very name that anchors her to herself seems to slip away, only to be recovered when a fawn helps her find her way. Then she comes across Tweedledum and Tweedledee. They are two brothers, nearly identical, engaged in a loud and completely nonsensical dispute over a broken rattle. They are the embodiment of trivial, circular conflict. While they argue, they recite the poem about the walrus and the carpenter, a story that is as strange as the brothers themselves. But then, they drop a bombshell that leaves Alice deeply unsettled. They tell her that she isn't actually a real person, but merely a character in a dream being had by the Red King. This introduces a sense of existential dread to the story. If Alice is just a figment of someone else's imagination, then her entire reality is fragile, a mere shadow of another's thought. The brothers' argument ends in a brief, absurd battle involving makeshift armor made of pillows and blankets, which is abruptly interrupted by the appearance of a giant crow, sending them scurrying away. Alice continues her trek across the chessboard, and the world keeps shifting. She encounters the White Queen, a character who operates on a logic that is almost impossible to grasp. The White Queen lives backwards in time. She experiences the consequences of an action before the action itself has even happened. It's a world of effect preceding cause, a total inversion of how we experience life. Alice then finds herself in a dark, cramped shop run by a sheep. The physics of this place are unstable, objects seem to dissolve or change when they are touched. This leads her to one of the most famous characters in all of literature, Humpty Dumpty. He is a large, arrogant egg sitting on a wall, and he possesses a terrifying kind of power. He claims that he can make words mean exactly whatever he chooses them to mean. To him, language isn't a shared tool for communication, but a weapon of personal will. He explains the strange portmanteau words found in the poem Jabberwocky, showing Alice how he can fuse sounds together to create new, nonsensical meanings. But once he has finished his lecture, he dismisses her abruptly, treating her with a condescension that is as infuriating as it is absurd. As Alice nears the end of her journey, the atmosphere becomes increasingly chaotic. She witnesses a procession of soldiers and a duel between the Red and White Knights. She is eventually escorted by the White Knight, a character who is a far cry from the menacing figures she has met. He is clumsy, eccentric, and quite well-meaning, a sort of bumbling inventor who is constantly falling off his horse or tripping over his own gadgets. He tells her a melancholy ballad, and in this moment there is a sudden, unexpected sense of genuine human connection. Despite the absurdity of his inventions, there is a certain sweetness and a touch of sadness to him that feels more real than much of the nonsense Alice has encountered. Alice finally reaches the 8th square, crossing a small brook to claim her prize. A golden crown appears on her head, and she is officially promoted to queen. But the celebration is anything but dignified. Her new status is met with immediate chaos. She is subjected to a series of nonsensical examinations by both the red and white queens. She is invited to a royal banquet where the food talks back to her, the guests behave erratically, and the entire social order seems to be unraveling. The madness becomes too much for Alice. Frustrated by the absurdity and the lack of any coherent logic, she reaches out and pulls the tablecloth, causing everything, the plates, the food, the guests, to come crashing down in a massive, chaotic heap. In that moment of collapse, Alice wakes up. She is back in her armchair, and the dream is over. She looks down at her kitten, Kitty, and the lines between the dream and reality become blurred once more. She wonders if the kitten was actually the Red Queen, or if she herself was nothing more than a dream being had by the Red King. When we look back at the story, the structure of the chessboard becomes the most important thing to consider. Unlike the first book, which felt like a series of random, episodic adventures, Through the Looking Glass is governed by a rigid, mathematical system. The chessboard provides a sense of order, but it's an order that is both a guide and a trap. It represents the social hierarchies and the rules of adult life. The idea that to move forward, you must follow a strict set of moves, and that progress is often an illusion. This brings us to the theme of language and identity. Through characters like Humpty Dumpty, Lewis Carroll explores the idea that our reality is constructed by the words we use. If a person can dictate what words mean, they can essentially dictate what is real. This connects to Alice's moment in the Nameless Wood, where the loss of her name feels like the loss of her very self. In a world where logic is inverted and words are unstable, how can anyone maintain a sense of who they are? There is also the constant theme of inversion. The Looking Glass world is a place of reversals. Time moves backward, movement is circular, and the consequences precede the causes. This mirrors the transition from childhood to maturity. As a child, Alice is a pawn, a piece being moved by the rules of others, navigating a world that doesn't quite make sense. As she moves toward becoming a queen, she gains more agency, but she also finds that royalty and adulthood are just as absurd, chaotic, and nonsensical as childhood. The ending, with its question of who is dreaming whom, moves the book from a simple children's tale into the realm of existential philosophy. Carroll, who was a mathematician by trade, plays with the idea of the observer and the observed. If Alice is a dream in the Red King's head, then her entire journey, her feelings, her frustrations, her very existence is contingent upon someone else's subconscious. It's a dizzying thought that challenges the stability of our own reality. In the end, Through the Looking Glass is a story about the struggle to find meaning in a world that refuses to be meaningful. It's about the attempt to impose order, through chess, through language, through social rules, on a reality that is fundamentally chaotic and shifting. Alice's journey from a pawn to a queen is a metaphor for the process of growing up, of trying to find one's place in a complex, often irrational world, and the realization that even when we reach the top, the game might still be just as nonsensical as when we started.